What are your thoughts on the lab being dedicated to Mr. Lalata and the plaque outside of the lab?
I think it's wonderful that we dedicated the lab to Mr. Lalata. It couldn't have happened to a better person. He put so much time and energy into promoting his love of science, and I know it means a lot to his family as well, and Mr. Lalata lives on through his legacy.
Well, on the morning that we were called into the office as teachers, I knew something serious had happened, and then Mr. Dennis let us know that Mr. Lalata had passed away. And the very first thing I thought of is we've got to find a way to commemorate this man in a big way on this campus for how wonderful he was with the kids and how dedicated he was to the school. And so we started talking about Lalata Lab probably that morning within an hour of knowing that he had passed away, and said this new lab over here, it was still dirt, has to be dedicated to Mr. Lalata. So it's been in the works for quite a long time.
I think the lab being dedicated to Mr. Lalata is I think no other person deserves it more than him. I think when I first got here, my first year, it was always really cool to see outside my window, and I would always used to see Mr. Lalata doing all these science projects and experiments, and I used to see the kids with like their spray cans making all this different stuff, and it was very inspiring to see all the stuff that he would do. And whenever I thought of a science teacher, and still to this day, whenever I think of a science teacher, he's the one I think of.
Well, I know everybody here misses Mr. Lalata, and I think it's a great tribute that the Science Lab is dedicated to him. Last Wednesday, it was really nice to have all the staff there and all of his family there for the dedication. And every day now we get to walk by. We do have the mural outside of the staff room that every day I look at. I get reminded of him, but now every time I look over there, in my heart, he's there. So it's really nice.
I think the plaque outside the science lab for Jojo Lalata is the honor he deserves. I'm glad the science lab is named after him. I was also happy to see his family here to see the dedication. And it's really special that his photo is on the plaque.
I think that's a very nice gesture on our part as, TRP community, because he has been a science teacher for many, many years here and very dedicated. And I think this is a really nice way for us to remember him.
I think that the plaque and the science lab being dedicated to Mr. Lalata is certainly it's very special. And it's certainly, it was a good idea because it keeps his memory and legacy alive. I know that he was looking forward to the lab, working with the kids in the new lab. So dedicating the lab for Mr. Lalata is just something really special that reminds us of what it's all about.
What are your fondest memories of Mr. Lalata?
Well, they're all kind of together because my fondest memories are just working with Mr. Lalata, witnessing him and his creativity and his love of teaching.
I think my fondest memory of Mr. Lalata is just, having random conversations with him, and, my first year, it's usually a scary time sometimes, the first year, and he was always very kind to me and very nice, and he offered me advice, and certain things he has told me in the past that, I'll always think about and I'll always remember. And, I think that's my fondest memory of Mr. Lalata.
There are quite a few fond memories. I was teaching science alongside Mr. Lalata years ago, so there are times when we would, on Wednesdays we'd meet, or just in the morning or afternoon, we'd, talk about lessons and try and figure out what we were doing and try and plan things and figure out how to reach kids and get them, when they weren't learning something, how to get them to that point where we wanted them to be. So a lot of fond memories there outside of school. A few times we did meet outside of school, and it was great seeing his personality, personal personality versus the teacher personality. So it's really great.
As far as fond memories with Mr. Lalata, he and I shared the same wing for many years, and he would walk past my old room 61 every day, and I knew he was coming down the hallway because I could hear his fancy shoes click the pavement. He was always dressed so sharply. I loved the sarcastic spears he would verbally throw at his students. And if somebody needed to be called ratchet, he wasn't afraid to say it. He was a stylish dresser, a super dedicated science teacher who meticulously went over all of the science notebooks and created very elaborate labs. The students trusted him and even thought of him as a friend to confide in. He was such a student advocate.
I have lots of fond memories of Mr. Lalata. I think something that's really important is that I still keep in touch with his family. So I think that's really, that's something that certainly keeps his memory and spirit alive here. But Mr. Lalata would always check in with me Friday afternoon at the end of the school day and before I would go home, because he would, I would fill him in on what adventure I would be getting into over the weekend or what I had planned for the weekend. And then on Monday mornings, he would check into me to see how my weekend went. So that's something that I certainly remember about Mr. Lalata.
I would have to say like the most fond memory I have of him is we always check in with, as he's a really good friend of mine, and we always, check in with each other to see how we're doing, or if we have any frustrations, in our teaching, and we help each other to like get stuff for our students. We'll go to Costco, to buy raffle prizes, and I remember in one of the raffle sessions that he usually have for kids, we actually went all the way to San Francisco because he wanted to get little fish, as like as a raffle prize, and he didn't want to go by himself, so we went there together. I have to say he really goes, up and beyond for his students. To acknowledge, the effort that his students put in his science classes.